everybody. My name's David Carney. I'm the Executive Director of the Career Industry Council of Australia, and I would like to welcome you to our webinar today. Before we get underway today, I would just like to make an acknowledgement of country. So the Career Industry Council of Australia would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea and community. I'd like to acknowledge that today I'm presenting on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. And I'd also like to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, or in fact First Nations people from around the globe who might be joining us for this particular session today. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get underway. Just to let you know, this session is being recorded. If you do experience any technical issues during the course of the session, we just ask you in the first instance to try refreshing your screen. If that doesn't work, you can log out of the session and log back in with the link that you've been provided. If you have some major technical issue during the course of the webinar, a copy of the webinar recording will be provided to you tomorrow, so you'll be able to access that. We do have the chat function open today. But I would say that we have had over 650 people register to attend the session from 17 different countries. So the chat function, feel free to obviously put your views in the chat. But if you've got any specific questions for any of our presenters, we would actually ask you to put into the Q&A button. That will allow them to be able to answer them for you while they're not presenting. The format today very much is we're going to hear from each of our presenters in the first instance, and then we're going to move into sort of an open discussion with each of them. And there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions. I'd like to thank our presenters for joining us. Obviously, we have some presenters that's where it's midnight and others where it's 6 a.m. in the morning. So, you know, a special thank you to our presenters who I'll get to in just a moment. Just an upcoming event from CECA on the 20th of October. We've got Professor Deb Osborne talking to us about career assessments and career conversations. If you're interested in that particular webinar, please feel free to visit the CECA webpage and click on the events tab where you can register for that particular session. So that's enough of the housekeeping. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. As I said, there's going to be a range of presentations over the next 75 minutes. So just a little bit longer than our normal CECA webinars, which go for an hour. We thought we would extend it so that you do have an opportunity to hear from everybody. We're going to start our presentations today with Catherine and Jana from the OECD, who are going to talk to us about a recent study in Australia around mid-career. So I might hand over to welcome Catherine and Jana and ask you to provide your presentation.
Thank you so much, David. And it's really a pleasure to be here today, even if it means getting up at 5:30 in the morning. So let me just pull up my presentation 1 second. Sorry, I'm trying to get to the full screen, and it is not right here.
Catherine, if you come to the bottom near your slider, there's a little projection screen.
This one here? No.
See it down the bottom where you've got notes, comments. Can you see that?
Yes.
And then the third icon along, there's like a screen. If you click on that.
How's that?
Perfect.
So, so Jana and I are here from the OECD, and we are labor market economists in the skills team. And we just like to also thank you, David, and CECA for hosting this webinar today. And also thank you to the Department of Education, Skills and Employment who funded this work. And I'll start by providing an overview of the project, and then Jana will take you through the survey findings, and I'll wrap up with some of our policy recommendations. So I think the context for this work is, as we all know, the labor market is in a state of flux. Even before the pandemic, over a quarter of jobs in Australia were at significant risk of automation. That's what this chart here is showing. The pandemic is likely to have accelerated these trends. And Australia's recent commitments to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050 are going to contribute to disturbances in the labor market, with green jobs likely to require a different set of skills than those required in some of the declining jobs. And of course, the pandemic itself has created a huge amount of disruption in labor markets, with some sectors shrinking and others booming. So at a time like this, speaking to someone who is informed about the labor market and can help adults to connect with promising job opportunities and training opportunities is really important. The report we launched in June of this year is the result of 1 year of partnership with the National Career Institute in Australia, and that's based in the Department of Education, Skills and Employment. It involved 22 video consultations with Australian stakeholders from across the country, including representatives from the federal government, the state and territory governments, and various career development associations and experts. It's also based on findings from a OECD survey of career guidance for adults. And this was an online survey that was conducted both in 2020 for some countries in the survey and 2021 for others, including Australia. And this survey filled an important knowledge gap by telling us a bit about how much adults are using career guidance and what their experience is like. And if they're not using it, what are the barriers? So based on that, as well as the interviews, we put together this review. And in this report, we're defining career guidance as a series of services intended to assist individuals of all age groups to make well-informed education, training, and occupation choices, and to manage their careers. And we need to make a distinction between career guidance, as defined this way, and job matching services, which are a bit more narrowly focused on quickly getting somebody into work. And job matching services are what are funded by the Australian job active centers. So there is a difference between the two, with career guidance being a bit more holistic. This report focuses on adults who are age 40 to 54 in mid-career. This was agreed to with the National Career Institute because they see this group as a target. They have been out of initial education for at least 10 years, which means that they have acquired a lot of skills informally while working on the job, but also some of their skills might be a bit out of date. And so there's an opportunity, because they still have many years left before retirement, to upskill and retrain, and they have time to take advantage of the returns to those education investments before retiring. And what we think that there are some characteristics that define quality career guidance for mid-career adults, as opposed to, well, that are distinct from career guidance for young people. Making skills visible is really important for this age group. These adults have, as I said, acquired skills informally over the course of their career that might not show up on their resume, and they could use some help in articulating those skills and possibly having them formally validated. It's also important that career guidance for this group help to identify transferable skills. So which jobs are in demand, and does the individual have skills that are transferable to those jobs? Which skill gaps are still left that need to be filled, maybe by training opportunities or work experiences? Guidance should also take into account that mid-career adults are often both either raising a family or caring for aging parents, or both, and they might not be as mobile and ability to move around the country as younger workers. And delivery methods also important. We heard several times during interviews that conducting career guidance in a group setting can be helpful for mid-career adults because it allows them to support one another and feel less alone in their employment transition. I'll now turn the floor over to Jana, who will walk through the survey findings.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for introducing both the report and the topics that we're going to cover today. I'm going to take us through some of the survey findings, and I'll present 5 key findings from our survey. But before we do that, I would like to invite everyone to participate in a poll. And as you should see now, there is a question up on your screen, which is, with respect to adults' participation in career guidance, how do you think Australia performs in international comparison? And so you can choose between that career guidance is used more, less, or to the same extent. So we can give that a little short minute, and then we can soon see what you think. So thank you everyone for voting. And as we see, about 55% of you today think that career guidance is used less in Australia compared to other countries, while 27% think it's used to the same extent, and 18% think it's used more in Australia. And so now we're going to see that according to the survey we conducted, career guidance is used more in Australia than other countries in the survey. In fact, 56% of mid-career adults report having spoken with a career guidance advisor over the past 5 years, while the survey average showed that 38% of mid-career adults in other countries had done the same. Now, there might be several reasons for why use of career guidance is higher in Australia than in the other countries. For instance, the survey was conducted later in the pandemic in Australia compared to the other countries. And as expected, there could have been more need for career advice. There might have been more programs available, and accessibility might have been higher for people due to a digitalization of the service because of the effects of the pandemic. Now, the next key finding is that even though we see that many Australians spoke to a career guidance advisor, there's a high inequality in use across different groups. Now, the figure that you see on your screen is specific to Australia only, and similar gaps are found in other countries, but they are particularly large in Australia. And we see that older adults, part-time workers, low-educated adults, women, foreign-born adults, and those who live in rural areas all use career guidance less than their more privileged peers. Now, this is concerning because we already know from before that participation in training is lower amongst those groups, and they also have lower labor market outcomes. So this could be an indicator that career guidance is not reaching those who could benefit the most from it. Now, before we continue with the key findings, we would like to invite you to another poll. And this time the question is, what do you think is the most common reason that adults report not using career guidance in Australia? There should be 8 options on your screen, and please choose one. And then we will go through the topic together. Thank you everyone for participating. And we see that by far, most of you replied that you think people didn't use career guidance because they did not know career guidance services existed, with 61% thinking that that is the reason, and about 12% thinking that it's too costly. So those are 2 main reasons you've given. And for our finding in the survey, we see that the largest reason mid-career adults do not speak to a career guidance advisor is because they did not feel the need to. This could indicate that a person is happy in their career and they don't need any help to make decisions or planning for the future. But it could also mean that some of these adults do not feel the need because they're not aware of the benefits of career guidance. Around 20% of adults stated that they did not know career guidance services existed, which was the most popular option in our poll. But this suggests that they might have used the services otherwise. Lack of time also seems to be a big barrier for people, with women more often citing family responsibilities and men more often citing work responsibilities as a reason that they didn't have time, while the other barriers were found to be minor in the survey. Now, for our fourth finding today, we see that Australians are much more likely to pay out of pocket than adults in other countries of the survey. And this applies to both mid-career adults and younger adults. And about 57% of Australian mid-career adults paid for services compared to only 27% in the survey average, which is a difference of 30 percentage point, and it's quite large. Which brings me to my fifth and final finding that I'm covering with you today, and is that just like in other countries in the survey, there is a large variety in providers who offer career guidance. The Public Employment Service is the most common provider, and this is also in line with what we see in other countries. What is interesting is that the use of education and training providers is higher in Australia than the other countries in the survey, and the use of private career guidance is lower than in the other countries in the survey. Now, we know that all providers have their benefits and drawbacks. But what's interesting is that private career guidance can be best suited in providing services for adults who are in transition between industries, who are looking to change their career completely. And these private career guidance advisors could be less biased in suggestions on training compared to other types of providers. So those were the key survey findings, and Catherine is now going to summarize some of the policy recommendations that were made based on this.
Thanks so much, Jana. And yeah, I'll just walk through some of highlight some of our key recommendations that came out of the report based on the survey findings, also on the policy questionnaires and interviews we had with stakeholders. The first is about reducing barriers for those who most need guidance. As Jana noted, one of the key barriers that adults have reported is that they don't feel they need the services or they're not aware of the services. And so raising awareness is really important. There's various ways to do this. In Flanders, for example, they have a national media campaign that lets people know about the publicly subsidized career guidance that is available in the country. Another way to reduce support, as Jana noted, cost was not reported as a huge barrier in Australia, and yet Australians report the highest rate of paying for career guidance relative to the other countries in our survey. And there are some groups who are not accessing these services as much as others. So suggest helping adults to reach these services. For example, in Flanders, there are career guidance vouchers that adults can put towards paying for career services that require them to pay half the cost and the state pays the other half. Also in the Netherlands, they used to have career vouchers that were specifically targeted at older workers who were facing employment transitions. It's also, as Jana noted, there are people who are older, lower educated, living in rural areas. These adults are accessing career guidance services less than others. So finding ways to directly reach out to those adults is going to be really important. There's already some good examples of this happening within Australia, and we're lucky to have Bernadette here today to tell us about the Jobs Victoria program. In Jobs Victoria, they've got a program called Job Advocates, where advocates actually go into the community, into libraries, community centers, and reach out to vulnerable adults who could benefit from services, including career guidance. I think that's a really promising example that could potentially be scaled up. And also, recognizing that there are large groups of people who are potentially at risk and are facing employment transition. So taking a bit more of a sectoral approach. We also are lucky today to have Jeanette here, who's going to tell us about the program in Canada called Edge Up, where it targets adults who were formerly in the oil and gas sector and helps to retrain them to work in the tech sector, which is potentially a promising future employment option. So we're going to learn more about those programs today, and I'll stop our presentation there, and looking forward to hearing from the other panelists and continuing this discussion.
Thanks very much, Catherine. As Catherine said in her presentation, we're now going to move into the phase where we are going to hear about some of these programs and services. So we are about to do a quick skip around the globe. We're going to hear from each of our presenters for about 5 minutes, just a little bit about their service. And then that's going to give us an opportunity to have more of a discussion. And as I said, if anything comes up through these sort of 5-minute presentations that you would like to ask presenters more information on, or if you've got any questions about the OECD information, please feel free to put that in the Q&A, and our presenters will be able to answer those for you. So I'd like to throw to Bernadette now, who's going to talk to us about the Jobs Victoria program. Thanks, Bernadette.
Thanks, David. And I'm just going to share my screen, if that's okay. Oh, okay, let me just try again. I'm not seeing it. Sorry, David. I'll have to try again. Oh, it's defaulting to your screen. Have you got it open, David?
We can see it on the screen, Bernadette.
Oh, can you? Oh, fabulous. Yeah. Okay, let's try again now. How's that? Beautiful.
Yep, perfect.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak with everyone today. I really will congratulate Catherine and Dana for the work that they've done at the OECD and raising awareness globally of the need for community-based career guidance programs. I'd like to just share with you a little bit about our mission, because this is really why we went down this track to support the Victorian government during the pandemic, build an ecosystem around connecting certainly those workers that were displaced, but getting workers back into a preferred career future for themselves. And our association is a member-based association. We are a not-for-profit educational charity. We've been going for about 47 years now, and we're a founding member of the Career Industry Council of Australia with a number of divisions. And the community program that we designed, that we then provided for Jobs Victoria, was actually based on a differential service delivery model that we delivered in 3 local city councils. So it's a real local initiative for local support, and it targets the group of individuals that perhaps are struggling to be supported through career guidance, don't have the funds, but also have transitioned out of education a number of years and therefore are looking for a way of engaging with services. So this differentiated service delivery model that we presented to Jobs Victoria, and Jobs Victoria is part of the Department of Precincts, Jobs Precincts and Regions. They were developing a very large initiative and invested $619 million in this program to support Victorians at the local level. So Victoria has a population of around 5.5 million, and it's growing. So it's in the southeast corner of Australia, but we are a very dynamic economy. And what was missing, whilst we had the employment agencies, or what was called the jobs network providers, and we also had job actives, the piece around career guidance was completely missing. So we were approached and came up, because we had this model that we were already using in community of a differentiated service delivery model. We were asked to participate in this development and the growth of this new ecosystem. So we had 2 roles. The first role was actually to train the job advocates, and there are over 147 of those right across the state. And Catherine had mentioned them. These are individuals who are trained as information navigators. They go out into community, they are facing people in the streets and supporting them with their questions, those initial career information questions, and they make referral within this larger Jobs Victoria ecosystem. So the Careers Guidance Service is called the CEAB Careers Counselling Service, and we stood this service up quite quickly during the pandemic, even though everything was in shutdown, and we established our system very quickly and opened on the 1st of August last year. And to date, we've seen 15,500 people come through for career guidance, fully funded by the state government. So I need to congratulate our state government. They've really conceptualised what a community-based career counselling service can be, and they're very concerned about the entire journey of that individual through that system. And we're seeing some fantastic results with people. Our unemployment rate is down to 2.9%. So, you know, in Australia, that's considered full employment, but we're still working with that group. And we're also seeing a lot of mid-career people coming through our service. The age bracket's a little bit bigger, from about 35 to 55, and we are seeing quite a few women. The interesting thing is that a lot of people that are coming through the service are actually employed, and the pandemic has shifted their thinking about their career. So they're coming looking for career guidance to support them to either make a change, return to study, or just have a professional at the other end of the phone or via Zoom or in person, because we do quite a bit of community-facing counselling, and to get that validation of their skills that's so important to transition them into their next career path. So those two programs within this ecosystem, it sounds more complex than it actually is, and an individual, and there's a whole section around it for people from EAL backgrounds. We have Indigenous counsellors also working within our program, and the community employment connectors are actually based with a different department, but this is a project where departments have come together to ensure that when a citizen starts their journey through this system, they're connected and they're engaged. So it's really quite unique, and very proud of what the Victorian government has conceptualised and is delivering for its citizens. Happy to take any emails or questions along the way. I think I've completed my 5 minutes, David. Is that right?
You've done well, Bernadette. You've done well.
Thank you. Okay.
Thanks very much, Bernadette. And what we will do is all of the slides, if anyone has presented slides today, we will send you a copy of those afterwards. So if you've not had a chance to copy down those details, we will get them. Thanks very much, Bernadette. We're now heading to Canada, to Tricia. And Tricia, I would welcome you to introduce yourself and let us know who you represent. Over to you, and we can see your screen perfectly.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And it's late at night here, middle of the night, but it's very exciting to be with you all. But if I start slurring my words, that's why. But it's really wonderful to be here with you, and it's exciting to see this report come out on Australia, because the OECD team did a similar report earlier this year on Canada. So we certainly learned a lot from it, and I'm looking forward to looking through this one too. So I'm just going to go through a few slides. I'm actually not going to spend a ton of time on them. It's a bit of context setting, and as David said, they'll be available afterwards if anyone's interested in more information. But I'm coming to you from the Future Skills Center, and hopefully my slides will advance. Here they go. Which is based in Canada, and I think some of the contextual issues are actually similar to Australia's in the increasing focus on skills and the needs that we're really seeing for a labor force that's going through a lot of transitions. And I think we're certainly well aware of, especially that mid-career age bracket as being a really pivotal part, and we'll talk a little bit about how we're seeing that, especially in some sector transitions around green, meeting our net zero targets. We've signed on to the same being net zero by 2050. So we focus on a few different things at FSC: insight, solutions, and systems change, and really thinking about how to push the boundaries of thinking about career guidance, advice, training, all of these things, and doing this with a view of building evidence and thinking more specifically about what works and what doesn't work, with the idea that eventually we can scale up the things that are proven to be effective. So we've counted lots of numbers. You can see there's lots of things we've done. We've put out lots of reports, done lots of things. But what is really the most interesting is across Canada, we have over 200 projects right now, and we're really excited to have Jeanette here, which is a project we're very excited about, which is one of these projects in Calgary, Alberta. But we have similar, I think, to what I'm hearing about Victoria, like each region has its own specific contours, its unique opportunities. Green transitions and sectoral transitions for adults won't look the same in Newfoundland and Labrador as it will in British Columbia or Alberta. And we're actually doing some things now that are really exciting. We're excited about around testing and really gearing towards that next wave of transitions across multiple sectors in Canada. So what we're focused on at Future Skills Center is taking this volume of projects and different things we're testing, including a lot of projects. I think I looked it up today in preparation for this, and 40% of our portfolio is looking at career guidance or skills training in some way. So often the training programs will involve a guidance component. So it's a very significant part of our project portfolio that includes that element. And we're thinking about how to turn those things into insights that then drives further impact in Canada. So a few focus areas for us this year especially are around sustainable futures and really focusing in on the sectors affected by both declining employment opportunities, such as oil and gas, which you'll hear about more from Jeanette, as well as ones that are really going to drive the future meeting our targets. And we are really invested a lot in testing career guidance and pathways. And of course, making sure there's a very strong focus throughout on inclusion so that all Canadians have opportunities in the future of work. So I think I'll leave it there because that's a little bit of context setting. Happy to discuss more about this and what we're seeing across Canada. But I really, the star of the show for us in Canada today is the good work happening in Calgary.
Wow, that was quick. Thanks, Tricia. It gives me a little bit more time. I appreciate that. As you know, I've been through this before. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Thank you so much for the opportunity for this today. And we were thrilled to be invited to this. And, we're quite proud of what the partnership that we've had with Future Skills Center. And quite frankly, we haven't had this opportunity to share this globally as much as we have tonight. So we really appreciate it. Can you see the screen at all? Okay, because it doesn't show up on mine. So that's great. I'll make it full screen. Is that better?
Yeah,
Hopefully.
we can see that, Jeanette. That's great.
Perfect. That's great. Thanks so much. So as Tricia said, I'm the director of EdgeUp and workforce at Calgary Economic Development. And to share a little bit about what EdgeUp is and what Calgary Economic Development is, our goal is really to strengthen our economy, and talent is one of the major pillars that's going to be able to move us forward. And so this program, when we had this opportunity through an RFP that was delivered from Future Skills Center, this was a great opportunity for us to help pivot a lot of our workforce. So to give you a little bit of insight, and this will be sent to you later. So EdgeUp is a short-term skills development program for mid-career oil and gas professionals. On average, the age was about 41, and who have been displaced from the oil and gas sector in Calgary. And it was designed to help them to transition to in-demand digital jobs across all sectors. The digital jobs was the greatest opportunity for job growth in Calgary. So the program is led by Calgary Economic Development with strong partnership with Future Skills Center. This all could not have happened without their investment of the career services support and the funding to help us deliver the training, and the fact that they were a strategic partner with us in helping us with the whole program design. It was also delivered in strong partnership with the Information and Communications Technology Council, which is national, 4 major post-secondary institutions in Calgary, and Ripen, which is our capstone provider. So this is essentially one of Canada's largest educational collaborations by a city and federal funding partner to support the transition of talent from a downturn sector to opportunities in the digital economy. So here's just an example of some of the partners that we have in place at this time. So when we take a look at it, you know, we've really had great fortune to look through the program design. So as a result of the downturn in oil and gas in 2014, thousands of highly educated and skilled professionals, such as energy engineers, geoscientists, were laid off from the sector. Unfortunately, due to their specialized skill sets in that sector, they found it really hard to secure employment. But at the same time, what we ended up seeing is a massive acceleration of digital technology and innovation across all sectors of our economy through the advancements of automation and digitization, which is no surprise to you, which is demanding new skill sets. So our sector went from a cyclical shift of up and down to a structural shift where the workforce needs have changed. So what we've needed to do is we needed to find out what that demand was going to be. So we ended up doing a digital transformation forecast to ensure that we were building the right skills relevant to the workforce that we need for tomorrow. So a recent study showed that Calgary businesses will spend almost $7.5 billion on digital transformation in the next few years. 70% of that will be outside the energy and environment sector. So how this started, we partnered with Information and Communication Technology Council, ICTC, in 2018, and we did a study called Mapping Calgary's Digital Future. And this was really critical, I think, for any of these type of programs, where we compared the skills of oil and gas professionals that have been laid off to those required for some of Calgary's most in-demand jobs, which were full stack developer, data analysts, IT project managers. And what we learned was from many of those individuals had competencies related to the needs of these new digital positions. For example, the average geoscientist has nearly 60% of the core skills and competencies needed to become a data analyst, or the average electrical engineer has more than half of the necessary skills to transition into a software developer role, which is the most in-demand job in the Calgary sector. So we created EdgeUp, and which there's 4 parts to the work plan. There's a skills mapping study, which I was just speaking about. There's a scale up design, consultations, extensive employer consultations and focus group sessions, and then preparations. And then program implementation, which is right now we're in EdgeUp 2.0 scale up opportunity. It's a $5.4 million investment from Future Skills to help us train up 320 individuals in our workforce. And then there's evidence generation. So what are we learning from this, and how can we apply this potentially and build some case studies that can be utilized in other markets, and this can be replicated based on what we've learned. And so the EdgeUp program would be delivered over 27 months to help over 320 employees of the oil and gas sector that have been laid off. We did the transition to tech training, which is about 2.5 weeks, and that was offered by ICTC. And what we learned is what was missing in our pilot program is we assumed that the highly technical workforce that we were working with of engineers and geoscientists, we assumed that they would have a breadth of understanding about digital transformation, which was incorrect. So we realized we had to add foundations of digital transformation training to this as well. And then we added more technical training programs beyond the core ones that we had in the pilot program. The other part that's really a critical part to this as for wraparound career services is that work integrated learning part of it. They go through approximately 3 weeks with Ripen, and to do a capstone project. And then there's an opportunity, because sometimes 3 weeks isn't enough to apply your skill sets. So then there was an opportunity for an additional work integrated learning opportunity through ICTC, where the individuals actually, or the companies actually get a wage subsidy of up to $7,000 for up to 3 months if they take individuals on. So it's a real important part of it. So essentially, the Edge Up participants compete in this 6-month intensive program that includes technical training and is complemented by career readiness skills, including one-on-one coaching, group coaching on cultural differences between industries. That's a really important part of it as well, because employers were also concerned that this talent would not be open to taking less compensation than what they were used to. And in some capacities, that could be 100,000, 200,000, 150,000 less potentially than what they were making in the oil and gas sector. But things have shifted in industry now. Tech is making a bit more. Oil and gas, for some of the opportunities, might be making a bit less. So we had to talk about salary expectations, resume and interview preparation, building confidence. Upon completion of their training, participants received a capstone opportunity, as I mentioned, where they, for a stipend of work, they also got some compensation. So what we did is we put individuals through training that was everything from cloud computing, cybersecurity, IT networking management, data analytics, full stack software development, the most in-demand skill in Calgary, and product management and digital product marketing. So they had a choice of what they wanted to go into. But again, it was free, but they had to commit to 6 months of training. What we did is we were fortunate to win 2 major awards for the program, but over 1,500 people, oil and gas professionals, and these are professionals, were interested in this program. And when we take a look at this, at the program here, there's right now we've got 169 employed or in training, between additional training between the Edge Up pilot and 2.0. We've got over 200 mid-career professionals have graduated from one of these 3 programs above. And we've got 150 more that are kind of involved in the training between product management, data analytics, et cetera. So you can see the previous occupation in oil and gas, the breadth of occupational backgrounds. And these individuals have been displaced, for many of them, have been displaced for anywhere from 1 to 5 to 6 years. And many of them have 2 degrees and a PhD and had not been able to re-engage into the workforce. So that's a huge loss for our economy. And, you know, it's really hard to attract that talent if we're not putting some of Calgary's most educated and skilled workforce back into the workforce and helping them re-engage. So you can see even a sectoral breakdown of new employment. We've got energy identified there. But a lot of those energy opportunities, the only way that they could get back in the door now is because a lot of their technical competencies are more relevant to the needs of the new energy industry. So as you can see here, 66% were previously unemployed for over a year, 55% were unemployed for 2 to 5 years. And taking a real toll. You know, a lot of these individuals were hoping retirement was they were hoping for the Freedom 55, and that was no longer an option, and depression was starting to sink in for many people, understandably. Many, you take a look at the professional background of these individuals. They've got 14 years of experience on average in mid to senior roles. So again, to not be able to utilize them in our workforce was quite the loss. And so when we take a look at kind of a bit of the demographics of the program, 43% were visible minority or newcomer, and 24% were women. But more than a third of these individuals had a master's or PhD. So sample job titles of where they're at right now is obviously all over the board for tech. But what we needed to do in the market is also prove that these individuals were prepared to pivot, and we're looking at new opportunities for careers, because I think a lot of people were concerned that this was going to be a short-term deal. And what's exciting is we are proving the model that these individuals have been very successful. And from those individuals we have had placed, I don't think any of them have been laid off at all at this date. So we've been very fortunate with that. So again, some of the learnings that came out of the pilot was we really needed to expand the technical training and the program preparation. We needed to add on basic foundations of digital transformation. We needed to add on post-secondary partners. Based on the demand of over 1,500, we had to increase our numbers from 98 to 320 individuals. We needed to add work integrated learning opportunities. It was critical when individuals are going through a 3 to 4 to 6 month program. That stipend is really important to help them survive. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to commit to the program long term. And that wage subsidy for employers was really critical to help them build a relationship with that individual, so it keeps them hired following the training. And again, as I mentioned, new training streams to be considered were really critical. And the fact that we did a lot of labor market studies to make sure that we were relevant to the needs of industry. I'll just, I won't go through this, but we'll forward this through to you after. It just shows that testimonials from employers, as well as testimonials from some of the graduates. If there's any questions, I'm open to answering whenever the Q&A opens up. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jeanette. Very passionate about your program. So that's always, we're all passionate about the program. So that's great. We're now about to head to Sweden. I think, as Australians, we hear a lot from Canadians. The Australians and Canadians obviously have this close relationship, but we don't very often hear from Sweden. So it's great that Dan is joining us from Sweden. And I'll let him introduce himself and let him talk about the program that they're doing in the Swedish ministry. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in this webinar. It's an early morning here in Stockholm. And my name is Dan Grannas, and I work as a senior advisor at the Ministry of Employment. And I'm a delegate of the OECD Committee of Employment, Labour and Social Affairs. And I'm also a board member of the OECD Program for International Assessment of Adult Competencies, PIAC. I have been involved in several skills projects done by the OECD, and at the moment I'm involved in a project with focus on skills assessment and anticipation for the green transition, together with colleagues from Australia and 3 other countries. So today I'm going to inform you about a new historical transition package in Sweden to improve long-term flexibility, adaptability, and security on the labor market. It's based on a proposal from the social partners and was approved by the Parliament in June. And as you might know, we have a strong tradition of tripartite collaboration in Sweden. And the social partners have been very involved in the negotiations and will continue to play an active role when the new package will come into force in October. And the transition package is based on 3 reform areas: a reformed labor law, a new student finance scheme, and a new basic transition and skills support. The labor law will be adapted to today's labor market to meet an increased need for flexibility and security. A new publicly funded student finance scheme for transition and retraining will be introduced to strengthen the position of employees. The scheme will make it significantly easier for people in midlife and with work experience to undertake further education or training using student finance, which will correspond then to at least 80% of their salary for up to 1 year. A new basic transition and skill support will cover both employed workers and workers with employment contracts that has been terminated. Access to the support will be conditional upon meeting several conditions, such as having worked for a minimum of hours or a week for a certain period of time. The support will consist of guidance, advice, and enhanced support for those with health problems. A new public transition organization will be set up at the Legal, Financial and Administrative Service Agency the agency will provide basic transition and skill support for workers not covered by the collective agreement. So it will involve the whole workforce, this new package. Already existing transition organization who can provide transition and skill support for that corresponds to the public transition and skill support will be able to register at the agency. And all employers, I would say, that finance transition and skill support through this registered organization will be eligible for compensation from the state. So this was a very short version of the content of the transition package. And you can find more information on the Swedish government's website. And you will also receive a link from the organizer after the webinar. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Dan, very much. We're now going to move into sort of a bit of a discussion about each of the different programs. And as I've said, if you've got specific questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A, and our presenters will keep an eye on the Q&A. Dan, I might start with you. I'd be interested to know, because obviously in Australia now, we've recently had a change of government. We now have a Labor government. And I'd be interested to know, since your new package has been announced, how have the employer groups and the trade unions reacted to this new transition package?
Well, I would say that they are very proud and happy. Since the government's transition package is based on a proposal from the social partners, the reform is a result of their negotiations, and the signing of the agreement was presented as an historic event by both sides from the social partners. And I took part in a meeting with the social partners when a question was raised if they don't fear that their investment in skills development among their employees could lead to a risk that some will start working for another employer after they have upgraded their skills. And the answer from the employer side was that this is a part of the overall settlement and everyone benefits from improved skills.
Thank you so much. Bernadette, I might throw to you now. You mentioned obviously the low level of unemployment in Victoria, and at the moment, like a lot of countries around the world, we are all experiencing fairly low levels of unemployment, but also significant skill shortages in certain industries. Why would you think that sort of Australian mid-career adults need career counselling and guidance services in this period of sort of low unemployment?
Well, thank you, David. I think that there's an absolute need for them to actually seek guidance because of the, in many ways, they're actually quite vulnerable. They are open to movement within their own position. They really need to have some support from an unbiased individual who can sit down and actually support them to work through the opportunities available to them. So rather than just jumping from one thing to another, being able to sit down and discuss at length what their skills are, identify those skills, and perhaps really consider for the first time what interests and values they really want to develop to ensure that they can sustain employment. I think that we've had an opportunity now for, particularly with so many people working from home, to really think about their futures. They're not necessarily wanting to perhaps go back to what they were happy with 5 or 6 years ago, but now they're really thinking beyond just the survival jobs. They're thinking about the next 10 to 15 years and how can they really harness those years to give them sustainable employment, but employment that really is very fulfilling. And I think that what's coming through our service at the moment are quite a number of people are asking, why am I working? So a professional career counsellor can really sit with them for a period of time. Our particular program, I need to mention that it's not time restricted. So individuals can come in and out of the service as often as they need to, and it's fully funded by the state government. So we are actually seeing a very good engagement level right across that mid-career range. And it's interesting that the highest number of people coming through the service are actually employed, but they're not satisfied with the employment that they have.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I would agree, Bernadette. I mean, I think we're starting to see that, aren't we? We're starting to see people who are gainfully employed, but are now starting to reevaluate as a result of COVID. What does employment actually mean to them? You know, and we are seeing a change in life-work balance, definitely.
Correct.
Trisha, I might throw to you now and ask you, because as a sort of a funder of programs, I think, you know, there would be people joining us today that probably in government agencies around the different countries represented that really try to grapple with this evaluation of programs or services that are funded. I'd particularly be interested to know sort of what are the challenges that you find in evaluating programs that have this career guidance component like Jobs Victoria?
Where do I start? How many challenges are there? But no, I think one of the things that we're really invested in, and I think in what we're excited about partners like EdgeUp and others, is, you know, shifting from thinking about, you know, counting the number of people who receive guidance services, which is good, but moving to thinking about the longer term outcomes. So what happens as a result of that? And you heard Jeanette talk about that. You know, we're looking very carefully at what are those longer term outcomes of receiving guidance, of going through training, and taking a look at that. And really, I think we have really low levels in Canada of people who are using guidance services. And especially among, it was interesting to hear you say that, Bernadette, about people who are employed are getting the guidance, because in Canada, actually, that group is using it even less. Like, we tend to have a system in Canada that, you know, is once you're kind of fallen out of the labor market, then you access guidance services. So we know that with all of the coming shifts in the economy, that this is going to be even more important. So we're really trying to stay very evidence informed and rooted. So I'd say one of the biggest challenges is just the longitudinal tracking, right? So keeping track, keeping tabs on people, what's happening to them, and getting and building that data set of what's happening to people over their lives. We do have one exciting initiative as part of our consortium. We've actually managed to link individual level data with Statistics Canada census or Statistics Canada tax records in a confidential way that's been vetted by their ethics board. So we're going to be able to take a look at the people who went through a program like EdgeUp and follow them, you know, actually for years to come and see what happens with their life. So we're really excited about building that kind of longitudinal picture. But certainly we have thus far had a system in Canada that focuses the funding on how many people went through your program, how many people did you serve, and more short-term oriented.
Thanks, Trisha. And probably Jeanette, just on that, picking up on that question, could you elaborate for us what role does career guidance play in the EdgeUp program?
Yeah, you know, to be honest, to deliver the program without career guidance, I think I don't think we would have the amount of success. I think it's been a really critical element. You know, so many people make the assumption that to provide funding for training or to provide training to somebody, if somebody doesn't, you know, they haven't had to do the resume for the past 10, 15 years because they've been so ingrained in another sector. So, you know, that if they can't present themselves well in a resume or in an interview, they'll never get the job. It doesn't matter how much training they've provided. So, you know, and what we did find too with a lot of our demographic is there was quite a bit of confidence building that we needed to really look at. I think, you know, when you're used to having, you know, certification, 2 degrees, PhD, you've been employed for so long and you've never had to really look for a job because that demand sector was just pulling you from one company to another. It's very humbling to take that first step and, you know, to have that career guidance around you and to back it up with, you know, here's why you need to make that pivot. And that was a real important part of the program too, is that labor market data that, you know, we were looking at that always to stay relevant to what the needs of industry were. And so we weren't just telling people to take training, we were showing them why and where that career path opportunity was. So, you know, we actually, based on the pilot to the EdgeUp 2.0 funding and funded program, we've actually added additional career supports so that, and a lot of it's through knowledge mobilization, optimization, but we've added those career supports to make sure that our individuals were supported to the maximum level to keep them engaged, because the longer after training that they don't get engaged into employment, the tougher it is for them to engage, especially in an industry. You know, the other thing we had to deal with for this industry is you're talking mid-career, 41 and up in many capacities, some of it a bit younger. Going into the tech career, digital career, which is often thought to be a bit of a younger demographic. You know, employers are looking for those youthful individuals just out of school to absorb that talent, thinking they're more open to learning. So we had to, you know, we really needed those career supports to help individuals in proving why they were the best fit and the hybrid of skill sets that they've got to back it up. Outside of just what they've learned, they've also got the project management experience and leadership, 14 years experience to back it up, to make them a stronger candidate. So none of that would have happened without the additional career supports that were in place.
Thanks, Jeanette. And Dan, I might throw back to you. We heard in the OECD presentation, you know, from Catherine, she was talking about, you know, adults who perhaps are less educated, older, or living in sort of, you know, regional or rural areas are less likely to sort of seek out career guidance for some sort of support. What approaches is the new system in Sweden that you're looking to implement? How do you plan on reaching out to those vulnerable people?
Thank you, David. This is a very relevant question, and we know that it's more common for the workforce in Sweden with higher skills to take part in lifelong learning. Since the package is based on social partners agreement, we don't have the full insight in how the discussion went when they agreed on the package. And while the package will come into force in October, we still don't have any information about who actually will take advantage of it. Looking at the outcome, the new support gives more workers than today a possibility of receiving transition and skill support. The reform gives higher ambition and focus on support for transition, including state compensation and for employers financing transition and skill support. Before the reform, workers covered by collective agreement had access to transition support through the transition organizations owned by the social partners. The new reform gives this possibility also to those not covered by collective agreements, and men are overrepresented in sectors not covered by collective agreements. I would also like to add that the new reform also strengthens the situations for those on temporary contracts who now will have access to support. And women, youth, foreign-born, and those who have not completed secondary school are overrepresented in having a temporary contract. And reaching out to those in most need for transition and skill support will be a task mainly for the public transition organization and the social partners transition organization.
Thanks, Dan. And I might pick up on that vulnerable, you know, target audience, Bernadette. Could you talk to us a little bit about, you know, what the, you know, Catherine mentioned it in her presentation again, you know, you touched on it, the role of the job advocates as part of the Jobs Victoria program and how they reach out to vulnerable adults.
They do this in a number of ways, David, because it's actually a complete system that the job seeker or the individual that's wanting to find out information, but also seek out services and connect to employment. So the job advocate is really the first step. They're out in community. Many of them are located in local facilities such as libraries, but also in shopping centres, in community centres, and they're based there with the opportunity to speak to individuals as they make an approach. So there's they can provide 5, 10, 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever it takes to ascertain the need for that individual. And then from that point, they're referred into components of the service. So if it's an individual that's looking for employment, they need to work to feed their families, they'll be referred immediately into the mentor program. The mentor program is actually the employment agency, but they're all connected. So, and then if it's an individual, perhaps it's a woman who wants to return to work after 10 years of child rearing and doesn't even know where to start, the advocate would then refer them into the career counselling service, and that's where we would pick them up. And our service is differentiated, so we have quite a bit of intake knowledge that comes across to us, often from the advocate, but we then build a profile around that individual and support them through a number of steps, including vocational assessment, particularly if they're not able to identify those transferable skills. So it's quite a comprehensive system. And then from our service, if they're ready, the resume is ready, the cover letter is ready, they may have had 1 or 2 sessions with interview technique, they're referred into the mentor system, and the mentors pick them up and find them employment. And it does work very, very well because it's local level knowledge, working at the local level need, and of course working directly with employers. And employers have access to the Jobs Victoria schemes. There are a number of opportunities and support services available for employers as well to connect with a pool of skilled workers. One of the things that Jobs Victoria didn't restrict, it wasn't just for employment, it really was about developing the individual as a whole person. So there's references or referrals into mental health services. There are referrals in for individuals that might disclose a disability and they need support through the National Disability Insurance Scheme. So all that information sits with the job advocates, and they then pick up and consider what parts of the system are best suited at that point in time. And again, David, there's a commitment at the moment for this program to continue at least until the middle of next year. Obviously, they will review it, and because it's such a greenfield program, it's only just started, we don't necessarily have all the evidence we need to make but we're starting to see trends. And I think the important thing is that as the service is broadcasted, when the government has its campaigns, and it has quite a few strong media campaigns, suddenly there is a big flux into the services at all levels. The advocates with their face-to-face services, and the careers counselling services provide both face-to-face in community and in the regions. So we have counsellors, professional guidance counsellors, right across Victoria, servicing again at the local need for those individuals.
Thanks, Bernadette. We've probably got time for one more. I might throw back to you, Tricia, if that's okay. I think we've heard a lot today about sector-based approaches, and I'd be interested, sort of as someone who funds programs, in your views as the value of a sector-based approach versus an individual approach.
Happily. I mean, we're doing so much with sectors. I even saw some of the questions come in on the chat, and I see that, there's similar concerns about declining sectors, displaced workers. So I think it's very much on the mind of career counselors, right? When these people are walking through the door and saying, we need help to make this transition. One of the things I think we're really mindful of at FSC is not just the sectors in decline, because obviously there's a need to support those workers, but also the other side of the coin, which is where are their opportunities, right? So we're working very closely with sectors such as the Agricultural Human Council. I had a call today with electricity, human resources, planning all of the electrical grid for Canada's future. And all of these opportunities for the future will require skills and a skilled labor force to meet that demand. And so I think we're really seeing a lot of sector associations and employers step up in Canada and take a very proactive planning approach. So I would love to see more engagement from career sector about that, about where the opportunities are for people, as well as thinking about displacement in sectors in decline.
Thank you so much, Tricia. I'm just conscious of time, and so I might just sort of do a bit of a wrap up and a thank you. I think that you can see from the chat and from the questions. I mean, I think this whole shift to sort of addressing what we're calling now this mid-career cohort, is really growing around the globe. I think for a long period of time, there's been a very strong focus on young people, which is really important. We need to make sure that our young people, make a great start in their careers. But I think for a long time, those people that are sort of mid-career have been sort of a forgotten generation somewhat, and they've had to sort of struggle their own way through, career change. And I think what COVID has done is that it's really shone a spotlight for governments around the world that we have to support this cohort of people, because, they're too young to retire, and they actually have a lot of skills to be able to transition into different sectors, as we've heard today. I think from Jeanette's presentation about those types of skills coming out of oil and gas that people had in all these other different sectors. I think, this cohort of people just needs an opportunity to get some help to be able to then obviously transition into that next phase of their career. So, look, I think it's been an enlightening discussion. I think that our attendees have found it really, really valuable. I'd like to finish just, by thanking our colleagues at the OECD, really because the OECD has shone a light on this mid-career area. So to Catherine and Jana for your work and your team that has obviously undertaken a significant amount of work in a number of different countries now. That's been great. And to Tricia and Jeanette from Canada, the work that's going on in Canada, thank you very much. To Dan in Sweden, obviously, there's a new package starting up. We're going to follow on with interest to see how that goes in Sweden. And obviously Bernadette in Australia. I mean, I think, Seeker has done a lot of work around promoting, the great work that's going on in Victoria, in particular the Jobs Victoria program. And I think from an Australian perspective, I think, one of the things that Jobs Victoria has done, which other states and territories can obviously have a look at, and maybe the Australian government can have a look at as well, is this more of a whole of person approach rather than just focusing the service on unemployment, right? So it's not just dealing with those people that are unemployed, it's actually how do we better support our total population. And I think, we commend the Victorian government for making an investment in that. And I think, as Bernadette said, discussions that I had with Bernadette when they first kicked off was interesting that it wasn't the unemployed people that were coming to the career counselling service. It was people who were gainfully employed that were actually looking to make a move. So, I think although all of these programs are in their early stages, I think there's a lot of learnings that we can share globally. And Jeanette and I had this discussion before we started today that, everywhere around the world, we're all facing the same types of problems. And I think if we can come together like we've done today, we can share our solutions. So thank you very much for our presenters. Tricia, you now can have an opportunity to go to bed, and Jeanette, you can go to bed. And for the rest of us, the day's just starting in Paris and in Stockholm. It's just starting, and we're starting to wind down in Australia. So thanks very much for your attendance, everybody, and to our presenters, thanks so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye now. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
very
David.
much.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.
Terrific. Thank you.